Hey there, fellow citizens of the internet. Welcome to the Moses Kabandana Podcast. Today, I have with me Mr. David Kitchen. He goes by Kitch. And I would like to talk to him, have a natural conversation about dedication, about the principle that we talk about, day in, day out of discipline. But what does that actually look like in practice, day in, day out? There's a huge distance between our conceptual understanding of what it means to be disciplined and actually being a disciplined individual. So, without any further ado, Mr. Kitch, welcome to the Moses Kabandana Podcast.
Oh man, thanks for having me, brother. I'm really excited to do this. I love the platform that you've built here and the conversations you're having with people. So anytime I get to connect with people that are like-minded and want to explore these topics, man, I nerd out over this stuff. So I'm excited to do this.
Okay, let's get it. So discipline, man. What would you say is the biggest misconception that people have when it comes to just being a disciplined individual?
Yeah, so I think the first thing that people get wrong is they have this idea of like white knuckling things, right? And like forcing yourself to do things. And I think part of that is what we see on social media. The hustle culture, especially in entrepreneurship, is really big. Where it's like work harder. It doesn't matter how you feel. Keep going. You always have to do more. And so I think we get this conception in our mind that discipline is my ability to continue to do things even though they might not be serving me just because I said I was going to do them. And so now I have to do them, right? And so I think that's probably where we go wrong first and foremost, is that discipline in our mind is this idea of like almost a David Goggins. And I love David Goggins. I have a ton of respect for the guy. But just that mindset, that militant mindset of discipline, to me is just it's not sustainable long term.
Okay. Yeah. No, that makes sense. And that's the key word, the key phrase there, sustainable across time, right? Because if you can knuckle your way through something for a week, well, what does that look like when you're in like week 50, 55, 59, 2 years later? Can you maintain that consistency across time? So that's well put. Well, you said you've played football and you've taught football, and I don't know much about the world of football. I've probably like thrown a football like a time or two, and I probably tried to catch one a time or two, and one of those times it hit me in the head, and so that was done. But what got you into football?
So for me, it was kind of just a natural fit. As a young kid, I was always a bigger kid, and so it was just a natural fit for me to be able to go out on a field and hit other kids. It's just as dumb and as corny and as kind of rudimentary as that is. That's how it started. And then as I got a little bit older, I realized, not even older, I guess probably middle school, I realized that I was pretty good at it, and I was like, okay, I can be better than a lot of people at this. And so there was this natural connection to it, and it was also an outlet for me. So I came from a single parent household. My stepfather, who was in my life early on, struggled with addiction. We saw some abusive things in the household. Like, it was just, I had this rage in me, right? This anger. And football was a place where I could take that out in a positive way. I could go and I could hit people and I could run around the field and do this, and it was fine. And then as I got older, the training that was associated with football, I also appreciated because I didn't have as much structure at home. The structure that football gave me really attracted me to it, because now it was like, no, I'm not only getting this physical outlet, but there's also this mental component to it of I have to be part of a team, and it's not an individual sport. It's about us. Yeah. And there's the training that goes into it. And so I quickly fell in love with the work, and I quickly fell in love with the background of it. And so as I got into high school, I was fortunate to go to a high school that had a very, very good football program. I was fortunate to go to a high school that was, literally nationally known for football and for the players that came through there. And so I was quickly indoctrinated into this culture of hard work and showing up day after day and putting the team first and making decisions that were best for the group versus just yourself. And it just stuck with me, man. And so, like I said, I fell in love with the weight room. I fell in love with training, and I trained twice a day, every day, from my 10th grade year through my senior year in high school. And you just realize the benefits of it, and you see the hard work pay off. And I was fortunate enough to be a good player on a great team. So that's how I got into football. That's how it started. And once it's in you, man, it's like a bug, dude. It gets under your skin, and it's a beautiful game. It's a violent game, but it's controlled aggression.
Okay, controlled aggression. That is a great segue into the question that I was already thinking of, which you mentioned that somehow you were attracted to the structure that was happening there. So there was no structure at home, but then football offered that for you. And the reason that stuck out to me is like, if I'm a teenager in high school, the last thing I want is structure. I want to go out and just break rules, do me, get in trouble. But here, structure is doing the exact opposite. Like, can you comment on that a little bit more? Like, why is it important to have structure? Like, when we're constantly hearing that go out, explore different things, try all kinds of different things, but in this case, structure was necessary for you in order for you to grow out of the circumstances that you were in.
Yeah, I think it was because I was so unstructured in other areas of my life. Because I had the freedom. My mom trusted me to do what I needed to do. Part of that was because she was working 2-3 jobs, so she didn't really, there wasn't a whole lot of oversight there all the time. And so I was so unstructured in so many other areas of my life that I liked the structure that I had in football. I liked having to be somewhere at a certain time. And not only that, I enjoyed being held accountable. And that's interesting because as I got older, that changed, right? So when I first started with football, I liked being held accountable. Then what happened is I started to get good at football, and my ego kicked in, and I became an angry teenager, like most teenagers. But I also had this chip on my shoulder because of my household situation, what I had grown up in. And so I became angry, and then I started to act out. And it was almost like this tug of war internally of I was this extremely structured and quote-unquote disciplined person when it came to my training and with football. But then if you saw me out in the social setting, I was a wild card. I was getting in fights, I was getting in trouble, I was doing all these things. And so it was always kind of this duality of my personality that I was able to, I would be the guy that would be out partying in high school and into college until 2-3 in the morning. But then at 7 a.m., I'm in the weight room. I'm in the gym, regardless of what happened the night before. And so it was always kind of this weird juxtaposition that existed in my personality.
Okay, so being in the gym 7 a.m. after like a long night, long crazy night, that screams to me dedication, right? To be in the weight room. Why do you think like that the dedication came for the gym, but not necessarily to like academically, right? For example, like staying up till 2 a.m. is not exactly conducive to a good academic performance. So there's no dedication there, but there's just insane dedication when it comes to the weight room. So it's not like you had lack of dedication. Like it's not like you were not dedicated. It's just you chose to be dedicated in some areas but not others. Was that it's kind of a dumb question, but was that like a conscious thing, or it just happened and you just looking back on it, you're like, well, I don't know why.
Looking back on it now, it was a prioritization issue. It was a priority issue. I didn't know what was important to me. I wanted to win so badly. I'm one of the most competitive people, at times to a fault, at a lot of times to a fault. I'm very, very competitive, and so any opportunity I have to win at something, if I can control it, I'm going to do my best to control everything I can to try and win, right? And so I love to compete, and so that football just happened to be the thing that I chose to compete at. And the other part was I was naturally stronger than a lot of people. So when I first started training, I just was naturally, I was bigger. And so genetically, I think I was kind of gifted. I got kind of a head start when it came to the weight room and that stuff. So I think I gravitated towards it. I noticed that early in my life, if you look back at the things that I put emphasis towards and the things that I put effort towards were things that I was naturally gifted at. And that's a lot different than who I am now. But growing up, that was kind of the mentality for me. And so I think that's where that dedication came from, was the fact that, one, I was good for it or good at it. And so it was reinforcing the concept of who I was in my head, that I was a good football player and I was a strong guy. And then on a psychological level, coming from seeing some verbal abuse and seeing some different things growing up, there was also always this piece of I'll never be bullied. And I knew that the weight room gave me that. The weight room gave me strength. So I was already physically talented. I was already good at that. But the weight room gave me even more confidence to know I will never be in a situation to be a victim.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. What's your bench press PR?
Best ever was 435.
Oh, jeez. That's nuts.
That was a long time ago. That was probably 5 years ago now.
Man, you got me beat. Mine is like 225, and I was already struggling.
Yeah. I came into college. It was 405 when I got to college, and then kind of worked its way up from there.
Man, that's a lot of weight, man. I don't think I'll ever be able to. Like the most I've ever weighed was like 168, and that's when I was benching right around 225.
Right. Okay.
Maxing out there, but.
So I played college football at 335 pounds. So I was 335 when I was playing college ball.
Wow, that's amazing. Like someone of that weight moving at the speed that you do and pushing the amount of weight that you are pushing. It's I can't even understand it because I have a relatively small figure, and so 300 plus weight and actually moving around, being active and clinging weight, and it's like, oh, that's amazing. That's amazing. So would it be fair to say that in football you knew your place, you knew why you were there, you had the structure, but outside of that, things you didn't quite know what the world outside of football looks like, right?
Yeah, definitely. I was really floating outside of football. I knew that I had a social circle that I was the center of attention of because I was a knucklehead and because I was the guy that would do the crazy stuff. I was the guy, I was that guy. And so, I think I really floated for a while outside of football, and I wasn't really sure. And even through college, I mean, ultimately I ended up at two career-ending injuries. So I had one that set me back, and then I had a second one, and then ended up having a third surgery after my football career. So when I lost football, it really all came to light because it had been my identity for so long. And it was the reason that I was in college. Now academically I did okay. I don't want to portray it as I was an F student, but I was average. And so when I lost football, I went through this period of really not knowing who I was. Because I didn't have the structure. I didn't have the team support. I didn't have that social circle that was built into having a team. And so I really struggled. And I really went through a period of where I was the party animal, and I would party Wednesday through Sunday because that was the only identity I had. And then all of a sudden I became super academic, and I was like, okay, I'm going to do really well at school, but nothing really stuck. It was like I was trying on these different identities until I found one that worked, and I think it took a long time for me to really figure out what that was, and it didn't come until I started coaching. So when I started coaching, that was the first time that I was like, oh no, this is kind of what I'm meant to do. And then as I transitioned into the business world, and now that I do what I do now with leadership consulting and speaking and those types of engagements, I realized that what I'm called to do is to help other people. And what I'm called to do is to serve other people and give value to other people, which is the exact opposite of the individualist nature that I grew up in.
Wow. So loss of identity, and you were, let's say, out in the woods, so to speak, proverbial woods, trying to find your way out, and then you found it. So how did you stumble into coaching? How does that come about?
So I graduated college with a business degree, and everybody in my life told me your athletics career is over, just let it go, move on, do something different. And so I started selling cloud solutions and IT systems, and I was making good money, but I was miserable. And I had the opportunity to start coaching at the high school level. A friend of mine who was a former coach of mine got a head coaching job and offered me to come and help out. And so I started doing it. I fell in love with it immediately. And I was like, no, this is it. Being around the young people and being able to teach them life lessons and see them progress and grow and mature. I was like, this is awesome. Like, this is great that I can help influence these young people and teach them the lessons that I wish I had somebody to teach me at a young age. And so what happened was I decided I wanted to be a strength and conditioning coach, which focuses primarily on the training aspect of sport. And I didn't know how to do that. I didn't know what that looked like. I had already graduated school. So what I did is I sat down and I looked up all the major universities on the East Coast, and I wrote all of them a letter saying that I would quit my job and come work for them for free. And I had somebody actually reach out to me and say, hey, if you want to come and do an internship, you can come do that. And so I quit my job. I moved 5 hours west to Pittsburgh, and I lived in it was an old high school that they turned into 1-bedroom apartments in a shady area of Pittsburgh, and you had to pay all cash and rent. And I lived there and worked at Robert Morris University for a few months for free. And then, from there, the kind of the career just started to blossom, and, right place, right time in some situations, a lot of long nights, a lot of studying, but, here we are 12 years later, I guess 11 years later now.
That's amazing, man. That's wow. So you really took initiative there. Kind of a dumb question here, but it's like when you were writing all these letters, there's obviously a possibility of rejection, a huge possibility of rejection. Was that even going through your mind, or you were just like you were dead focused on the goal, and whatever means it took, you're gonna reach out, even if it meant getting 30 rejections, you're gonna go through it?
One of the things that I have to always highlight is that going through the sales route and doing sales, I got very comfortable with rejection. Okay. And comfortable is not the right word. I got tolerant to rejection. And so when I wrote these letters, rejection didn't cross my mind. It was just, no, somebody's going to say yes. And because the motto for a salesman is always, you're always one no away from a yes, right? If you get through these no's, you get excited because one of them is going to be a yes, just a numbers game, right? Yeah. And so it was the same concept there. And then the other part is I'm blessed that my mother and my grandmother instilled in me probably a delusional belief in myself to where I do have this, and I've always kind of had this innate ability to bet on myself and just know one way or another I'm going to figure it out. And so I was really fortunate for that I was always taught, U-turns in life are okay. And my grandmother used to say that all the time. You're going to make U-turns. They're not always going to be a straight line. And so I knew even if I failed, I could make a U-turn.
Okay. Well, let's stick on that topic of failure then. So there was a time in my life where I was really afraid of failing, right? So much so that if something seemed hard enough for the possibility of failure to be high, I just wouldn't even go for it. I just wouldn't even try. There was a U-turn at some point, right, as you put it, where the fear of failure excited me. Right? I'll just be looking for. Okay, I'm gonna go after this, and the chances of me failing are high, but there's so many lessons that are going to be buried in the failure alone that the failure is worth going through. So what does that mean to you when you hear that?
Yeah, that's more what I identify with now.
Okay.
And so when I look at things now, I get excited for the adversity. I get excited for the lessons because I look at things and I'm like, okay, this is an opportunity for me to challenge who I think I am. Let's see. Are you as disciplined as you think you are? Are you as resilient as you think you are? Are you all these things that you're telling yourself all the time and you're telling other people that you're these things? Let's see if you are. Go through it and find out, right? And so I think there's something to be said about that. Now, the second piece with failure is if you think in a long enough time horizon, there's no such thing as failure, right? And so one of the things that I ask myself when people say failure, I think to myself, is it going to matter in 5 days? Is it going to matter in 5 weeks? Is it going to matter in 5 months? Is it going to matter in 5 years, right? So if you play the time horizon out and you expand it, the risk really diminishes because you're like, no, I can recover from this. What's the worst thing that's going to happen here? From a failure standpoint. And So that's part of it. And then the other part that I like to consider always is, I think if you remove the choice, that's a big key to action. And so one of the things, so just to give an easy example, if you don't feel like going to the gym, but you put your shoes on, you go to the weight room, and you just start loading the bar. Well, what are you going to do? You're not going to take your shoes off, unload the bar, and go home without doing the reps, right? And so you're just going to do it because you're already there. So I think a lot of times just taking some sort of action and removing the choice will help you get through it. And so whenever I'm faced with things in my life, I try and just take some sort of action. And part of that is because it just forces me to be in it. Now you're in. Just go. You've already dipped your toe in the water. You're already here. Just go. And so, that's a big piece of it. But I think failure is so misunderstood because it's self-defined. You define what failure is. You just like you define what success is. You define what failure is to you. And if you come from a mentality of you know that you're gonna play every single second of this out, you're gonna continue to go no matter what, even if you're down 100-0 on the scoreboard, you're gonna continue to play. The time on the clock becomes irrelevant, right? And so you're no longer afraid of failure.
Yeah, it's easier said than done, of course.
Absolutely.
But once it clicks, it's not like the fear is like all of a sudden gone. It's still there, but you know what lies on the other side of fear. So just for example, like I set up this month of July to learn to be a private pilot, right? You said it earlier. Don't give yourself an out, right? It's just you have no choice. Like remove that option, right? So the option of, well, I'm gonna take it in between July and September, and then if it goes well, I might. No, I was like, hey, we have July. That's all we got. No more, no less. We have 31 days to get this going, and let's get going. So I just today I actually flew for the first time by myself without my instructor, but just the fear that wait a minute in 2 weeks I'll be flying by myself, that doesn't make any sense. It's like way overwhelming, but the way that I go about it, again, it's always easier said than done, but I take it in small chunks. Like, what is the smallest possible step that I can take in order to achieve the goal that I want? And sometimes that goal is so small that it's insulting to myself, right? But hey, that's where we're at. That is where we're at, and yeah. So to a coach,
yeah, it's the same concept, right? You just break it down into tasks. Like I look at my life, I'm big on seasons, and so I when I teach it to my mentorship groups or things like that, I tell them go back to school, right? So school is broken up into 16-week semesters, 8-week classes, 4-week blocks of certain topics. Break your life down like that, and ask yourself, what are my main goals for these next 4 weeks, 8 weeks, 12 weeks, 16 weeks? And if you start to do it that way, and you do it task by task, tasks become projects become goals, and then all of a sudden you're crushing your goals and you're doing the things that you want to do. But you have to look at life in a sense of seasons, and in that season, what is important to me? What are the things that I want to optimize for, right? And so if your goal is, okay, I'm going to get my pilot's license in this month, I'm going to learn how to fly, well, then the other areas of your life may have to take a back seat, and you might have to just maintain them for this season, and that's okay. You can't be perfect in everything, right? So it's a balancing act at the same time.
Yeah. So speaking of balance, there, well, I guess not balance. What do you think is like the biggest hurdle, the biggest obstacle that people face when they're trying to like establish a new habit, or they're trying to reach goal A? Let's say I wanna go back to benching 225, and you helped me set out the goals, right? But then it's somewhere between me not lifting and me lifting 225, I fall off. I quit. Like, what do you think is the biggest hurdle that people face when it comes to attaining their goals?
People run into problems when they're trying to attain goals, when their goals are not attached to some sort of why, when they're not attached to some sort of deeper reason, right? So you said I want to bench 225. My question to you would be why? What's your reason behind that, right? And if you don't have something, then when the adversity strikes, it's easy to change that. And the psychology research supports that, right? That if it's attached to a value or some way of supporting your self-identity or your internal identity of who you believe yourself to be, then you're more likely to attain it if it supports one of those things. If it doesn't support that thing, then it's easy for you to start looking at what are called task irrelevant cues, so things that will pull your attention other ways. So then it becomes, I'm going to move my workout today, or I'm going to do this later, or this is going to get moved, right? And so I think that's step number one. So whenever somebody tells me they want to start a new habit, I always say, why? What's your reason behind it? And then you go from there and break it down into the pieces. But there's going to be setbacks. There's going to be grit. It's going to require grit, right? But it's one of those things where, and fitness is a good example of this. It's like if your car has a flat tire, right? You don't slash the other 3 tires and just say, I got to get a new car, right? But we do that with fitness. We do that with fitness goals all the time. You miss a workout, and then what do? I'll chop the day. So that means that I can eat out tonight. That means I can have a couple drinks tonight. I can do this. I can do that. Yeah. I'll get back on track on Monday. Why? Why can't you just win your next moment, right? So a lot of times when we're trying to build habits, I tell people, don't worry about winning days. Win moments. Because if you win enough moments, then the momentum is there, and then you can start to win days, and then things start to compile and compound, and now you start to see real progress towards your goals.
Yeah, that's something that a good coach would know, and I say that because one of my flight instructors, he would know my limits long before I knew my own limits, right? And so he would push me up to the point where I'm like, I think maybe I should not be taking over this responsibility at this stage of flight, but he knows that I can do it. And then I freak out when I start doing it, and then I ease into it, and obviously he's there just in case something happens. But it's only when I come back home and I'm like, whoa, when the day began today, I didn't think that I was able to do that. But a good coach, a good flight instructor, they know where your limits are long before you know your own. So I say that in support of what you just said, but also kind of like pushing a little bit the message of you are almost always capable, way more capable than you're allowing yourself to be. So we're often our biggest obstacle, right? So if you are your biggest obstacle, try to get out of your own way every now and then, and practice. Like what does it mean to get out of my way? So what ages do you coach, if I may ask?
So I coached when I did coach for 10 years. I coached college, so it was 18 to 20, 17 to 22, 23.
Oh, okay. What was your biggest obstacle in coaching that age range?
Perspective. So from 17 to 23, you can struggle in not identifying with outcomes, right? And so what I mean by that is, say you get hurt and you're injured and now you miss half a season or whatever. You have to be able to shake that off, and you have to be able to say, is it a bad scene or a bad movie? It's one bad scene. Yeah. So we're not going to throw away the whole movie because of one bad scene, right? And so the big thing that I would always try and impart on young men and young women is perspective, is understanding that nothing happens in a vacuum in your life, right? So how you respond to this physical challenge is representative of how you're going to respond to other challenges later in life. So you have to build the habit of responding in the way that you want to respond when adversity comes, and not just reacting emotionally. Because if you get hurt, your emotional reaction is, okay, this sucks. I'm going to pull back. I'm going to put myself in a shell for a couple days and let myself heal, right? And I'm not going to deal with these things, or I'm not going to get back to work. That's not a proper reaction. You can't do that in the real world, right? If you lose your job and you have a family, you can't say that I'm going to take the next 6 weeks and just not do anything. You have to provide, right? So you have to. That's the beautiful thing about sport, is that it teaches lessons that go so far beyond athletics. They translate to life. It's being on time. And I tell kids this all the time. If you show up at 8 o'clock, at 7:59 for an 8 a.m. lift, you're going to be the same guy that's showing up late for sales meetings, that's wondering why their quota isn't met, that's wondering all these different things, why you got passed over for promotion. Those little things matter. They add up over time. And so sport allows you the opportunity to build those tools and to build those habits and to build those response patterns that are going to serve you throughout your whole life.
Yeah. Someone was asking me the other day, we went to, Airsoft?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so we went out, me and the boys, playing some Airsoft. But before we went, someone asked, like, why you want to go play Airsoft? It doesn't sound fun. It's a bunch of, there's a lot of pain involved, and that they just could not comprehend it. But there's just tons of team communication, tons of like life lessons that are buried in just in one game of Airsoft. If you're on my team, and well, one, we're trying to not get shot. I mean, there's no death in this case, right? But we have to communicate, and we have to communicate where to go, how to move, how low are we staying, are we running, like everything, who's looking where, right? And so the idea that communication is important, we say that a lot, we throw that around left and right, but in practice, it's a whole different ball game. So when it came to coaching, how has your style of communication changed as you became a coach from before?
Wow, that's a great question. I would say the way my communication has changed has been my ability to be an empathetic listener and be an active listener. So it's less so about me and more so about them. And I think when you're young as a leader, so when I first started coaching, it was my way or the highway. And it was I was not empathetic. I didn't want to hear it. I just wanted it done a certain way. Yeah. What I realized was that put a ceiling on how well I could connect with people and the level of trust that I would get from them. And so now I'm a lot more empathetic, and the best leaders that I've been around are phenomenal listeners. And so my primary communication tool now is asking questions, and not just yes/no questions. I want to ask open-ended questions. I want to know why. I want to know, tell me about, things like that. Questions that are going to bring out more than just a simple answer. That's what I'm looking for, because I want to get to know the person, because for me, that's going to tell me what motivates you. It's going to tell me what goals you have. It's going to tell me how deep you trust. It's going to tell me a lot of things about you that are going to allow me to then influence you, because that's what leadership is. We want to be able to influence people. It's going to allow me to influence you in a way that resonates with you. It's going to allow me to communicate the vision in a way that resonates with you individually. Because we all have different experiences. We all have different values. We have different cultural influences. We have different socioeconomic backgrounds. We all think differently. We have a unique human experience. And so I need to know as much as I can about this person in order for me to have an influential and persuasive conversation with them in a way that actually resonates with them.
My mind got stuck on the phrase that you said, the way that you used to communicate put a ceiling on how you would connect with people. Why is connecting with people so important in this case? That might sound like a dumb question, but I'm just genuinely curious.
No, because as humans, that's what we want, right? So if you look at the psychology research behind group dynamics, the number one thing that people want in a group dynamic is the feeling of safety and trust. If the leader is not empathetic, there's no way to build safety and trust. And so right there, you just capped how high your leadership potential can be, and you just capped how far your culture can grow just by doing that, but just by not doing that one thing, by not providing safety and trust. No,
that aligns with a different conversation that I was having with someone else, and we were talking about the alpha male chimp, right? And the idea that we have in mind that it's the biggest, the strongest one that beats everybody up. But that's not the case. It is in the short term, right? Because the biggest one that beats everybody, all it takes is one day, 2 or 3 really, really fed up chimps. They'll surround them and they'll just tear them to shreds. So there's no longevity in that way of ruling, in that way of being a leader. The ones that tend to lead in the medium to long term are the ones that have this reciprocal relationship with those that are, let's say, have less influence and they're weaker than them. But there's that reciprocity that goes back and forth. It's like, hey, I know I can abuse my power to just punch you left and right and until you're dead, but I'm not going to. I have that power, but I won't do it. And so, yeah, that just came to mind as we were talking about the importance of connecting with the other people from a leadership standpoint. So that essentially makes you a stronger leader than the my way or the highway.
Yeah, there's no doubt, because the best leaders represent 5 main character traits, and they found this through research. And the first one is character. They know who they are, they know who they're not, they know their values, and they're very open about those things. Number 2, they're consistent. They show up consistently as the same person every day. Why? Because people operate off of pattern recognition. We like patterns as humans. We like baselines. Yep. We like predictability. So great leaders are consistent. They're consistent in what they do. They're consistent in the way that they do it. They're committed, but they're committed to the right things, and they represent commitment to the right things. So great leaders are committed to the people, the culture, and the vision. Right? Not the results. So the people, the culture, and the vision. Those are the 3 things that they're committed to. The results are a byproduct. So once they're committed, now they're able to communicate what they're committed to very effectively. They're able to communicate why it's important, why we're going where we're going. They're able to shed light on those things, and again, communicate that with the people on a one-to-one basis, on a one-to-many basis. And then lastly, really effective leaders are extremely creative. They're able to find new ways, and they're able to innovate, and they're able to identify new opportunities, right? So those 5 things show up in effective leadership. If you think about being somebody that's not empathetic, you're really breaking most of those 5 things, right? Because your character, you're showing them that you have problems and you're not able to emotionally regulate, which then goes into your inability to be consistent, right? You're not committed to the right things because you're not committed to the people, or you would be more empathetic, right? So it shows up all across the board, and it limits your leadership ability.
Wow. Well, this next question has nothing to do with leadership or discipline. It's just about you, right? What is, as far as we can think of, as far as we can travel back in memory, what is your absolute earliest memory that you got? Like, as far back as you can think.
Wow. That's my earliest memory.
Throw you off for a second.
I would say the zoo, and I was probably 4 or 5 years old. I remember riding an elephant.
Really? Okay.
Now, part of that's because there's a picture that primes it. Like, there's a picture at my mother's house that I see, so it primes the memory. But I can vividly, like, you can smell it. I can feel it. I can remember it.
That's great. Okay, so 4. Okay, yeah. A lot of people say somewhere between 3 and 5 tend to be the absolute earliest memory. And when was the last time you revisited that memory?
Man, it's been a long time. I couldn't even tell you. I couldn't even tell you.
Yeah. That fascinates me for, I don't know why, but it does to me, because it's like there is this image that's in our head, this experience, and as you described it, you can smell it, right? And it's a couple decades, old, and that memory is there. Why? It's just, I'm just getting fascinated by that.
It's interesting, like, how we encode memory as a human. So I'm working on my PhD in psychology now, so I do a lot of
nice.
I do a lot of work with social cognition and memory and things like that. But the encoding process for memory is really interesting, because the memories that we tend to encode tend to be emotionally charged in one way or another, right? But if you look at a memory like that, I don't know what the emotion would be. I was so young, Right. So there's not really there's not really an answer to that. It is interesting.
Yeah. And so I'm not just asking so that I can, get to know the baby you. It's just a question that I started asking, like, I don't know, 3-4 months ago, just to myself, and then just friends and other people, and I'm building this like deposit, if you would, of like earliest memories of people. Anyways, back to the main topic here. When it comes to building, like being a disciplined individual, right? So if I say, hey, I'm going to be dedicated at going to the gym every day 7 a.m., right? And then like you said, there's gonna be like a Tuesday that I'm gonna be like, I don't really feel like today, but I will next Tuesday, or I'll go, next Monday. You breaking up, the chain there. Why is it so important to be not just disciplined, but like consistent in your discipline, right?
Yeah.
You said, like, the showing up, showing up, 7:59 when it's 8. Well, yeah, you showed up, but like, why is it important to be not only disciplined, but be quite dedicated in the frequency of your discipline?
Yeah, it's a couple of things. So first off, humans again we function off of pattern recognition, internally and externally. So when I'm associating with other people, I'm watching their patterns. People are watching my patterns, but I'm also internally watching my own patterns. So when people say to me, "I lack self-confidence," what I hear is, you don't keep promises to yourself, because that's how you build self-confidence, by keeping promises to yourself. Because what you're doing is you're creating continuity between what your behaviors and your self-concept. So and I'm not talking about the self-concept like what we say to ourselves in the mirror. I'm talking about what we say to ourselves when the lights are off and it's just you at night. I'm talking about that deep, dark, who are you, right?
Yeah.
So that's number one. So we want to create that continuity as often as possible by doing things that align with the person that we want to be, the person, the identity that we're trying to really inherently, ingrain in us. We have to do behaviors that align with that. So that's why it's important, number one. Number two, consistency in and of itself will solve 90% of your problems in life if you're consistent in the right things. If you're consistent in the wrong things, it will create 90% of your problems in life. And so being consistent over time allows you to build systems that make it hard to fail. They make it really hard to go backwards, because you're building habits. You're starting to habituate behaviors. And what happens when you habituate behaviors is that cues for that behavior can become less and less, or more and more subtle, would be the way that you would want to say. So the cue can become more and more subtle to set off that behavior, right? So think about somebody that smokes cigarettes, right? Everything's a cue for them to smoke a cigarette. People that really like smoke, everything becomes a cue. I'm stressed, I smoke a cigarette. I'm hungry, I smoke a cigarette. I just ate, I smoke a cigarette. I just, made love, I smoke a cigarette. Like, everything becomes a cue, but those cues can become more and more subtle. And so the same is true of positive behaviors, right? So if you're people that really love to work out, if they're stressed, what do they want to do? I'm going to go for a run, right? So you can create systems in your life that reinforce the person that you want to be just by being consistent. Because you're lowering the amount of friction that it takes to get the system moving in that direction, right? Okay. And so it can be little things. Alex Hormozy talks about watering holes. So he identifies places in his house that he considers his watering holes, places that he spends a lot of time, and he primes himself in those areas with different cues. So one of the things that he wanted to get better at doing was putting on sunscreen. And so he put sunscreen in every area of the house that he spends a lot of time. Why? Because it became front of mind. He's seeing it more. Yep. If you want to read more, put books in your watering hole, right? Yeah. If you things like that, those are the things that you can do. When people say to me, "I want to get better sleep. I'm not sleeping well," first question I ask them, "Where's your cell phone when you go to bed?" Well, it's next to my bed. Why? Move it across the room. Move it out of the room. So you can create and remove friction that's going to make your habits and your ability to be consistent better.
Okay. Well, so that addresses how to build habits, preferably good habits. What if you're trying to get rid of a habit? So let's say I'm the junk food munching type, and I'm genuinely trying to change. I want to eat healthier, or I want to go to the gym. Well, or maybe like I'm spending too much time at the gym because that brings a lot of value to me, but zero time at home, or like zero time with the loved ones. So there's a bit of a relatively giant imbalance between where I want things to be, and you're trying to get rid of a habit. What are some useful steps that we can take away with this?
Yeah, so to break habits, and behavior change is difficult. Behavior change is a difficult thing for humans, because we again, our bodies even function this way. We like homeostasis. We like where things are neutral, right? And so once a habit becomes ingrained, that's our default state. And so behavior change can be difficult. But what we want to do, the first thing that you want to do is identify why you want to change the habit. Again, it has to connect to a deeper reason. What's your value behind it? So the example that you gave, maybe I need to spend more time at home. Well, my family is important to me. And so that's what I'm linking this value to, or linking this habit to. So the first thing is linking. You want to link it to something important, something about your identity. The second thing, you want to prime the identity. So you want to surround yourself with things that reinforce what you want to be, so the behavior that you want to become, right? So if you want to be a healthier individual, you want to go to the gym more, it would make more sense for you to then surround yourself with things that remind you of that, things that remind you of the identity that you're trying to build. So maybe you follow more social media profiles that are healthier, less junk food, things like that. The next thing you want to do is you want to create barriers. Okay, so you want to create barriers and create friction to doing the old habit. Right, so you want to make it more difficult for you to do that old habit. So, for instance, if you want to quit, say, smoking cigarettes, and we'll just use that because it's an easy example. You want to quit smoking cigarettes. The fastest way to create friction: don't have cigarettes in the house. What do most people do? Well, I'm going to keep one just in case. It's my emergency one. It's my emergency one. No, throw them all out. Get them out. Okay, if you don't want to eat ice cream, if you don't want to eat junk food, don't keep junk food in the house. Create a barrier. Okay. Make it difficult. Make it apparent that you have to make a conscious decision to go get it, right? So if you have ice cream, if you don't want to eat junk food, and you have to get up off the couch, get dressed, get in the car, drive to the store, get the ice cream, how much time do you have to reconsider that decision?
Right.
You have a lot of time, right? You have a lot of time. It takes the impulsivity out of it, because that's what behaviors are. So what we have to do is interrupt the cycle. We have to interrupt the cue, behavior, reward cycle that behaviors or that habits function on. So if you can interrupt that, then you do better. And so that's one thing you want to do. You want to try and, again, create barriers and create ways to interrupt the pattern. And then the second, or the last thing that you'd want to do would be to start stacking a new habit on top. It's not enough to just get rid of an old habit. You have to replace it with something else. So, for instance, if typically you wake up in the morning, you have your coffee, and you start to work immediately, but you want to start reading more. That's what your new habit wants to be. Well, then what you should do is, okay, I'm going to wake up, I'm going to drink my coffee. As soon as I finish drinking my coffee, I'm going to start reading, because now this habit of drinking my coffee is going to set off my habit of reading, right? So that's how you go through behavior change.
Man, you are. It's a powerful combination that you have there. So you're a coach, right? You're a communicator, and you said you're getting a PhD in psychology. The coach and the psychology, those two are they just go hand in hand, right?
Absolutely, it's the human game.
Yeah. What made you pursue the PhD in psychology?
So I had a master's degree in sports psych. That was more directly correlated to visualization, performance anxiety, arousal curves, things like that. Okay. And then as I got into the leadership consulting and the leadership space, I'm a nerd. I want to know not just what happens, but I want to know why. I like to reverse engineer things and figure out the process. And so to me, the PhD in psychology was just a natural way to be able to dive deeper into that and understand habits and understand leadership and understand the traits that go into being a great leader. And not only that, it makes me a better human. I think my ability to understand people makes me more empathetic, because I do understand the human experience a little bit deeper. Doesn't make you perfect. If anything, it makes, sometimes you read the psychology books and you're like, man, I'm crazy too. So that's kind of why I got into that, but it's always interested me. And just on a root level, going back to my childhood, I had a complicated childhood. And so to be able to understand myself a little better, there's a selfish reason behind it as well.
Yep. Yeah, I read the first psychology book that I read was, I don't know, a year after college, which was a book that I was supposed to have read in college. It was an assigned reading, and during college I was like, dude, no, I'm not gonna put any time for this. It's called The Power of Habit. I forgot the author that writes it.
I'm looking at it right now. Charles Duhigg.
Yeah, I think so. But it's an amazing thing to understand habits. I still don't fully understand habits, but the thing that I got from that book at the very least was what you just said, friction, right? Just put a barrier between me and the very thing that I'm trying to avoid. It's very simply put, but it works. It works.
It's so simple. We overcomplicate it so often. That's why people I think it was James Clear talked about this. He wrote Atomic Habits, and he talks about if you want to get up and run in the morning, put your clothes out. Get up, put your clothes right there, put your alarm clock on the other side of the room. So what are you going to do? You're going to get up out of bed, you're going to stand up, you're going to walk over, turn the alarm clock off. When you turn around, what's right in front of you? Your running shoes and your clothes, right? Yeah. It's about creating ease, because what you do then is you create systems, and that's how you win over time. Winning once can be luck. Winning over time requires systems.
Yeah. Man, Kitch, it's crazy. It's been almost an hour already. It's kind of like flew by. So as one of the main reasons for wanting to have this conversation was to take it out of the conceptual world, right? Of, hey, get out there and be consistent, and you need to persevere. You need to and find more like practical examples, right? Mm-hmm. You want to achieve this. Here is the challenge. Here are some systems, as you put it, that you can follow in your own life, so that hopefully you can if you stick with those systems, medium to long term, you will achieve your goals. And I just want to say, like, super thank you for coming in and sharing a lot of your knowledge. But as we're coming to an end here, what are some of the things that you would like to leave the audience with? Some of the final thoughts.
Yeah, I think the big thing is understand the power of identity, and understand the power of proximity and what you surround yourself with, and the ability that you have to change the human experience whenever you want. All you have to do is make the decision to surround yourself with the right things and prime that identity, and you're off to the races. The second thing that I always like to leave people with is the reminder that successful people, and I've been fortunate to be around a lot of millionaires, professional athletes, C-suite executives, etc. These people are not special. They are humans just like you, just like me. They just have built really good systems in their life that make it really hard for them to fail. And so success is out there for anybody. Our company mantra is built, not born, because anybody can build these skills.
Yeah. And speaking of your company, what is? Do you have a book? Do you have? Where can people find you on social media, and name of the company?
Yeah. So the name of the company is Edge Leadership Academy. We do one-on-one mentoring. We do one-on-one coaching, business coaching, high performance coaching, sales coaching, any type of coaching that you could think of. We have a curriculum for it. We also do keynote addresses and group cohorts. If you want us to come into your organization and work with your teams, we do that as well. You can find us. I'm on every social media at Coach D Kitch. I'm on everything. Is the same thing. I keep it simple. And then our website is edgeleadershipacademy.com. We do have a book out. I have 2 books out right now. I have the Scoreboard, which is an audit system for people to audit their habits and audit their behaviors and see what's working, what's not working in their life, and then how to change those things. And then I also have a book out called The Pyramid, which is a leadership guide for coaches to build leaders within their teams. So both of those books are available on Amazon. The Pyramid or the Scoreboard is also available on Gumroad. But if anybody has any questions about that, please reach out and I can get you in touch with whoever the right people are to make sure that you get a copy.
Okay, man. Again, thank you so much for coming in, and hopefully you can revisit the elephant memory a bit more often, or maybe you should go and actually take a ride on an elephant again. See what that does.
That's it. You know what, Moses? I enjoyed this so much, man. Let me do something. I don't normally do this. Anybody who wants the Scoreboard, if they reach out to me and they mention that they heard it on this podcast, I'll give it to them for free. If they reach out to me and tell me that they heard it on this podcast, I will send them a copy for free.
You heard it here, everybody. Hey, Kitch, thank you so much for coming to the Moses Kabandana Podcast, and hopefully we can have a similar conversation in the future.
Absolutely, man. Thank you so much for having me. I enjoyed it.
Okay, good day.